For the past year, I've been stuck in a frustrating and unsustainable cycle of burnout, recovery, and back to burnout again. I'd pushed myself to the limit for weeks, months even, ignoring how fatigued or unmotivated I felt, and simply kept going because there was always more that needed to get done. Then inevitably the exhaustion would catch up with me. When that happened, I'd crash, and I'd crash hard. I would take then a few days to recover, only to dive right back in and repeat the same process over again. I'm not here to say I hate my work. I love it. I'm living what I've always considered my dream job. I run multiple startups, I've built stability around what I'm passionate about, and I wake up every day with an opportunity to work on projects I care deeply about. But as time passed, I did start to notice something. Even though I loved my work, there were key moments when I would hit a wall. I would lose all passion, feel completely unmotivated, and even start to dread the next day. Sometimes I'd stay up late just to avoid facing tomorrow. It's dumb, but it would be a day that would be filled with endless tasks, interruptions, and responsibilities. Eventually, after reflecting and looking at this from every angle, I realized that the core issue wasn't just overwork. It was the loss of control. When I first started my businesses, my goal wasn't just financial success. I was chasing freedom. I wanted to decide how I spend my time, focus on meaningful projects, and enjoy creative fulfillment. But as the businesses grew, and with them the responsibilities, demands, and fires to put out, that freedom disappeared. My days no longer felt like my own. Instead of being driven by my goals and plans, I was constantly reacting, always caught up in other people's needs or urgent tasks that felt like they could never wait. The more I reflected, the clearer it became. If I continued on this path, I wouldn't just burn out physically. I'd lose the joy and passion that made me want to do this work in the first place. I wouldn't just lose productivity, I'd lose myself. That's when I knew I needed to rethink everything. I wanted a system, a structure, not for my businesses, but for me. Something that would let me stay productive, help me protect my energy, and align my work with my values of freedom and growth. And that's where the GPRE cycle was born. The GPRE cycle, which stands for goal setting, push, rest, and evaluation, is my personal productivity methodology. But it's more than that. It's a way to create balance and avoid burnout while still keeping momentum going. I think of it as a kind of business interval training. You push with focus, you rest deliberately, and you evaluate to grow stronger each round. It's allowed me to regain control of my schedule, find meaning in my work again, and maintain my energy. Not just for days, but for long stretches of demanding weeks and months. If you're facing similar struggles, if you feel like you're always working but still losing your edge, or like you're always chasing fires without ever feeling fulfilled, the GPRE cycle might help you reclaim control and create a way forward. Before I dive deeper into the structure of the GPRE cycle, I want to set the stage with something fundamental. The philosophy behind it. This system didn't come out of nowhere. It's rooted in years of trial and error and honestly making the same mistakes over and over before finally understanding what I was doing wrong. I've always been a bit of an extreme person. It's just a part of who I am. And when I'm passionate about something, I go all in. Whether it's work, training, personal projects, or even the simplest things like eating habits. I've always lived at the edges, swinging between intense work bursts and total burnout. For years, I believed that this was what success demanded. Constant hustle, constant pushing, no slowing down. But over time, that mindset started breaking apart. The truth became painfully clear. Living at the extremes isn't sustainable. When you push endlessly without rest, you burn out. That's just reality. Your body and mind can't function at peak performance if they don't have the time to recover. The same is true when you rest for too long. You stagnate. Progress halts, and instead of feeling rested, you feel like you've lost momentum. I've experienced both of these firsthand, and eventually I realized something powerful. True progress, the kind that lasts, is found in the middle. Balance isn't some one-size-fits-all concept. Balance doesn't mean dividing your time equally between work and rest, or following some traditional sense of what a normal schedule looks like. What works for others might not work for you, or for me. I've learned that balance is about finding your own rhythm or my own rhythm, one that propels you forward, works for your personal strengths and habits, and keeps you moving sustainably. For me, the GPRE cycle has been the perfect framework to strike that balance. But balance isn't the only goal. At its core, the GPRE cycle is about regaining control. When everything feels overwhelming, when deadlines, tasks, and responsibilities pile up, it's easy to feel powerless. But with a structured workflow like this, you're not just reacting to what's thrown at you. You're operating with intention. You're setting clear goals, taking deliberate action, giving yourself time to recover, and reflecting meaningfully on what to improve. Another way to think about this is in terms of interval training. Just like an athlete alternates between bursts of intense effort and periods of rest to grow stronger, the GPRE cycle builds intervals into work life. You're not working endlessly or crashing until you can no longer function. You're working in sustainable bursts. The intervals ensure that you can keep going without burning out and that you're not just surviving, but thriving. This philosophy, a combination of balance, rhythm, control, and deliberate intervals, not only underpins the GPRE cycle, but serves as a lens for everything I do. It's helped me move beyond the hustle culture mentality of always doing more and instead focus on doing what matters in a way that I can actually sustain. The GPRE cycle is divided into 4 key phases: goal setting, push, rest, and evaluation. Each of these phases plays a distinct role in creating a sustainable rhythm for productivity and recovery. Together, they form a structured yet adaptable system that keeps you focused, maintains your energy, and helps you continuously improve. Let's dive into each phase in detail. Every cycle begins with goal setting. This phase is about deciding what matters most in the short term and defining your priorities with specific, actionable outcomes. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of tasks on your plate, especially when you're managing multiple businesses or roles. For me, it all begins with the task bucket. This is essentially a master list where I dump everything that needs to get done. Strategic projects, immediate priorities, creative work, and even smaller day-to-day tasks. It keeps everything in one place so I don't lose track of what's important across my various ventures. But here's the trick: you don't tackle the whole bucket at once. During each goal-setting phase, I focus on identifying the handful of tasks that will have the most meaningful impact in my current cycle. For example, I might choose specific deliverables that need to be completed within a few days for one company. I could prioritize tasks for another business if it's facing urgent needs, while delaying other work until the next cycle. I make space for personal and creative priorities, ensuring I don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Deciding what to focus on isn't random. It's all about what will move the needle right now. Once I've chosen the tasks for the cycle, the next step is defining success. This part is critical. It's not enough to write "complete the project" and leave it at that. I ask myself, how will I know if this task is truly successful? Are there measurable results I can attach to this task? Will the result be based on outcomes, which are things like revenue or efficiency? Or will they be based on satisfaction, such as I'm proud of the quality or the client is happy? For example, if my task is to launch a marketing campaign, I don't stop at launch campaign. I push myself to ask, what does success mean? Is it bringing in an X number of leads or boosting engagement by an X percentage? Metrics like these provide clarity and focus. Of course, not every task will have easy to define metrics. Sometimes tasks might feel vague or even messy. And when that happens, I focus on completion, just getting it done. Then during the evaluation phase, I reflect on what created the messiness and what can be improved on for the future. This turns even chaotic tasks into a chance to learn and adapt. One of the key things to making goal setting work is resisting the urge to micromanage yourself. Personally, I found that rigidly planning every moment doesn't work for me. If I overschedule, I feel trapped, and when life inevitably doesn't go according to plan, I feel overwhelmed. So within my task selection, I leave room for flexibility. I set guardrails to guide my efforts, but I don't rigidly lock myself into a step-by-step to-do list. The result? I feel both focused and free. I know what I need to do, but I have the flexibility to adapt as needed within the cycle. Once the goals are set, it's time for the push phase. This is where the real work gets done. Focused, deliberate effort towards accomplishing the tasks you've prioritized for the cycle. The push phase isn't just about working harder, it's about working smarter. To me, that means eliminating distractions, diving deep into focus mode, and structuring my work into manageable chunks that maximize productivity without overwhelming me. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that deep work doesn't happen in scattered bursts across the day. To truly get something done, especially tasks like strategizing, planning, or designing, I need uninterrupted blocks of time. That's why I break my push phase into mini focus cycles, which are essentially 2 to 4 hour blocks dedicated to one single task or a group of related tasks. During these cycles, I eliminate all distractions, no meetings, notifications, or external demands. I work intensively on just one thing, pushing as hard as I can within that time. Once I finish a session, I take a short break to regroup before diving back in. This method lets me maintain a high level of focus without burning out. Everyone works differently though. Some might find shorter cycles like 25-minute Pomodoros work better for them. The key is finding what fits your workflow and energy levels. Interruptions are inevitable, especially in a fast-paced environment like startups. Someone always needs something, and emergencies don't wait for permission. When interruptions happen, I don't dwell on the time or momentum lost. Or at least I try not to. Instead, I reset as quickly as possible. I tell myself it happened. Start over. Lingering on the frustration of an interruption wastes even more energy. By resetting immediately, I minimize the disruption and keep moving forward. Push mode isn't just about you. It's also about getting others to respect your workflow. I've had to learn how to set firm boundaries with colleagues, clients, and even my teammates. This often means communicating clearly about what I need. Like saying, I'm dedicating the next 2 hours to this project. Let's reconnect afterward. Getting buy-in from others can be messy. Not everyone will understand immediately. But over time, consistent boundary setting builds respect and reduces interruptions. If there's one phase of the GPRE cycle people tend to overlook, it's rest. It's easy to convince yourself that taking a break is wasted time or something you can push off for later. After all, there's always more work to do, right? But I've learned, sometimes the hard way, that rest isn't optional. In fact, rest is what sustains everything else. For me, rest isn't about lounging around aimlessly or taking an entire week off, although that may be necessary sometimes. It's about efficiency, resting in a way that genuinely resets my energy, clears my head, and allows me to come back sharper and more focused. One of the mental shifts that helped me prioritize rest was reframing it as an obligation. It's not something I do just because I feel tired. It's something I need to do if I want to keep performing at the level I require of myself. Rest is the fuel that keeps the engine running, and without it, everything else starts to break down. When I push too hard for too long without taking meaningful breaks, the results are predictable. My work suffers, I stop being creative or effective. Plans get messy, mistakes creep in, and the quality of what I deliver drops significantly. I lose control. Without rest, even small problems feel overwhelming. I find myself reacting instead of thinking strategically. I also lose passion. This is the biggest red flag for me. When I stop enjoying the work I normally love, it's a clear sign that something is wrong. If you want to stay sharp, energized, and effective over the long term, you can't view rest as an indulgence. Instead, it has to be baked into your workflow as a non-negotiable part of the process. You wouldn't sprint endlessly without ever catching your breath. Rest works the same way for your mind and your work. The way I approach rest starts with recognizing what type of recovery I need most. For me, rest is rarely about physical recovery. It's about giving my brain a chance to reset. A mental refresh is the difference between dragging myself to the next task list and showing up ready to tackle it in full force. Here's how I recharge effectively. Step 1 is full detachment. The first thing I do, especially after an intense push, is disconnect completely from all work-related responsibilities. That means stepping away from emails, notifications, and any communication that keeps my brain in problem-solving mode. For me, disconnection doesn't always have to last long. Sometimes just a few hours or a single day can be enough to quiet the noise around me. Why is this important? As someone who's fully introverted, I need time to recover from the constant demands of interaction. Spending even a few hours focused solely on myself, allows me to recharge mentally before anything else. It's my starting point for productive rest. Once I've disconnected, I shift to activities that genuinely bring me joy. For some people, this might mean taking a long nap or mindlessly watching a show. But my way of resting often looks a little more active. Activities like brainstorming new ideas, journaling, or even creating videos or articles feel restorative for me because they engage my creativity without the usual pressure of deadlines. The key difference here is that these aren't tasks tied to expectations. They're purely for me. Whether I'm walking in nature, reading something inspiring, or working on a creative idea, the key is to focus on activities that don't feel like work. Rest doesn't always have to last forever. For me, a day and a half of proper recovery is usually enough to reset my energy. Sometimes even just a focused half day spent recharging is all I need before I'm ready to work again. The length of the rest doesn't matter as much as the quality of the rest. I'll be completely honest, prioritizing rest hasn't come easily for me. Even now, I sometimes struggle with guilt when I'm not working. I've spent so much of my life equating productivity with worth that it's hard to shake the idea that taking a break is selfish or wasteful. But here's what I've come to realize. You're not doing anyone any favors by working yourself into the ground. If you burn out, your team suffers, your work suffers, and ultimately, you suffer. The way I combat rest guilt is simple. I treat rest as a critical obligation. If I expect myself to perform at a high level, then rest isn't an indulgence, it's a requirement. It's what allows me to stay creative, focused, and in control. It's not about taking days off without purpose. It's about recognizing that deliberate, intentional breaks are what make it possible to keep moving forward. Even when you prioritize rest, outside demands can still sneak in. In a fast-paced environment like startups, it's not uncommon for colleagues or clients to expect you to respond immediately, even during your downtime. For me, dealing with this comes down to clear boundaries and firm communication. It's important to set expectations up front. If I'm disconnecting, I let people around me know. I'll be unavailable for X amount of time. Let's connect when I'm back. When people understand that rest is part of my process, they're more likely to respect it. The next thing is to stick to your boundaries. If someone still attempts to interrupt, I don't hesitate to ignore those messages. When I'm ready, I circle back and explain I was resting to recharge. How can I help? Over time, people learn to adjust their expectations. At the end of the day, prioritizing rest requires you to take control of your time, even when others may not fully understand. It's about building a culture of respect, starting with yourself. Rest isn't wasted time. It's the foundation that lets everything else work. Whether it's stepping away for a day, indulging in creativity, or simply disconnecting for an hour, rest keeps you sharp. Without it, the work will always catch up to you, no matter how focused or efficient you are. The final phase of the GPRE cycle is evaluation, and while it may sound less exciting than the other stages, is the one that ties everything together. This phase ensures that each cycle builds on the one before it, turning your work into a process of continuous improvement. Without reflection, it's easy to repeat the same mistakes, overestimate your progress, or overlook areas where you could be working smarter and not harder. For me, evaluation isn't about perfection, it's about growth. The goal is to identify what worked, what didn't, and what I can do differently in the next cycle to improve both results and the process itself. When I evaluate my cycles, I focus on three main areas: the result, satisfaction, and the process. These aren't rigid categories. Sometimes they overlap, but they give me a clear framework to reflect on my efforts. First comes the results. Did I achieve what I set out to do? This is the most obvious starting point, and I ask myself if I met my goals for this cycle. For tasks with measurable metrics, this might mean looking at numbers, for example, revenue, clicks, or lead generated. For more creative or strategic tasks, it's about assessing whether I delivered what I set out to create. However, results go beyond just checking boxes. I also evaluate whether the outcomes were meaningful. For instance, I might finish a task exactly as planned, but if the result didn't create real progress, or if it felt unnecessary in hindsight, that's something to take note of. Reflection questions I ask here include: did this task or project move me closer to my bigger goals? Did I hit the performance indicators I set during the goal setting phase? Were the outcomes worth the time and effort I invested? The second element is satisfaction. How did I feel about my work and my results? This part is equally critical. I've learned over time that delivering great results for others doesn't mean much if I feel dissatisfied personally. Satisfaction hits two levels. Was I happy with the work I produced? And did I enjoy the process of creating it? For example, I might finish an important project and meet all my metrics, but if the process felt miserable or like it drained me to my core, that's a sign that something needs to change. I firmly believe in balancing the quality of the output with the quality of the experience. If I'm not proud of what I delivered, or if the process made me dread waking up the next day, that's a red flag. This also includes reflecting on the emotional toll of the cycle. Did I feel in control of my time and energy, or did the work weigh heavily on me? Did I set boundaries and respect my own limits? Satisfaction isn't just about the final product, it's about making the journey sustainable. Finally, I look at how the overall process unfolded. This is where I ask questions like, were my goals realistic and clearly defined? Did my push phase flow smoothly, or did I struggle with distractions? Was my rest phase effective in helping me recharge? I'm particularly interested in spotting patterns. For example, if my push phase keeps getting derailed by interruptions, maybe I need to communicate boundaries more clearly. If certain type of tasks feel overwhelming every time, maybe they need to be broken into smaller steps. Ultimately, the goal of this reflection is to figure out how I can refine the next cycle. It's about being honest with yourself, recognizing both your wins and your missteps so you can keep growing. One thing I'm still figuring out is the best way to document my evaluations. Right now, I approach this in a simple way. Note-taking throughout the cycle. As I work, I jot down quick thoughts, challenges, and observations. For example, if something feels messy or if I struggle to stay focused, I'll write it down. These notes give me context for my reflection later. At the end of the cycle, I create a one-pager capturing the key takeaways. This is where I reflect on what went well, what didn't, and what I can do differently next time. The one-pager doesn't have to be polished. It's just for me, but it helps tie everything together and makes it easier to look back over time. For tools, I keep it relatively lightweight. I usually use a tablet or a notebook for quick notes. I believe the best system is the one that feels natural and sustainable. You do not need a fancy template to reflect effectively. You just need a method that encourages you to stop, think, and document your lessons. When I first started using the GPRE cycle, I didn't take the evaluation phase as seriously as I should have. I used to think, what's the point? I know how I feel. Why do I need to write it down? But when I skipped this step, I fell into the same traps over and over again. Choosing the wrong tasks, pushing too hard, or failing to adjust when something wasn't working. Here's what I've realized. Evaluation isn't just about reflecting on the past, it's about shaping the future. By taking time to consciously analyze what worked and what didn't, you build a better roadmap for your next cycle. Over time, these small adjustments compound and make a huge difference in your results, your workflow, and your overall satisfaction. Reflection isn't a luxury or a chore. Is one of the smartest investments you can make in your work. The evaluation phase turns every cycle into an opportunity to grow, refine, and improve. Without it, progress stalls. But with it, every step becomes a building block for the next one. The GPRE cycle isn't just a productivity method. It's a way to regain control, protect your well-being, and maintain sustainable progress. Each phase, goal setting, push, rest, and evaluation, play a unique role. But together they form a system that creates balance and rhythm in even the most demanding environments. Let's break down the key takeaways to keep in mind as you incorporate the GPRE cycle into your own life. Start every cycle by asking yourself what matters the most right now. Use a task bucket to organize your priorities, but pull only the most meaningful and relevant tasks for this specific cycle. Define success clearly, whether it's measurable metrics or personal satisfaction, and focus on goals that align with your bigger vision. Treat your push phase like a sprint. Focus entirely, work deeply, and eliminate distractions. Divide your work into manageable mini-focus cycles. For example, 2 to 4 hours of uninterrupted time, and take short breaks in between. Set boundaries with colleagues or clients to protect your focus. Communicate openly about your availability and revisit when interruptions occur. If life derails your plans, don't let frustration hold you back. Simply reset and restart. Remember that rest isn't indulgent. It's essential to sustaining high performance. Treat it as an obligation to yourself and your work. Start with full detachment, stepping away from communication, devices, and work-related distractions to reset mentally. Find activities you enjoy that feel restorative, whether it's creative projects, journaling, or simply relaxing. Rest doesn't have to mean doing nothing. It's about doing what rejuvenates you. Set clear boundaries during rest periods to avoid interruptions. Let people know you're unavailable and stick to it. Use this time deliberately so you can return sharper and more energized. Use the evaluation phase to turn your efforts into lessons for the future. Reflect on 3 key areas. Results. Did you achieve what you set out to do? Were the outcomes meaningful? Satisfaction. Were you happy with the results and the process? How did the work make you feel? And process. What about your workflow worked well? What could you adjust for the next time? Document your thoughts, whether through simple notes or post-cycle summaries, to track your progress over time. At its core, the GPRE cycle functions like interval training for business. Just as athletes alternate between bursts of intense effort and deliberate recovery, this system helps you balance productivity with recovery. If you're interested in more general business tips or productivity tips, I encourage you to watch this playlist right here. And if you want to know more about lead generation for your business, I have a video I recommend right here. Let's make it happen.